Space, the final frontier, to boldly go where no one has gone before, except astronauts, billionaires, and actors. So how did we go from the fictional sci-fi world of Star Trek to landing a man on the moon to Captain Kirk actually going into space? From Sci-Fi to Sci-Fact. Mentions of space travel and exploration can be found dating back as far as the 1600s. However, science fiction as we know it today really gained popularity in the early 20th century, with magazines, radio, movies, and television shows opening up a futuristic world of imagination. While much of this sci-fi content featured aliens wanting to take over the Earth, the public's interest in space exploration was growing, and by mid-century, what was once seen as science fiction was becoming science fact. The 1950s was the beginning of the Cold War era, a period of political conflict between the U.S. and the USSR, later to become Russia. A byproduct of this conflict was the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles to carry nuclear weapons between continents. Ironically, these weapons were later used as rockets to carry space probes, satellites, and humans into Earth's orbit. With each country trying to outdo the other, the space race was on. Both countries viewed the space race as a high-tech competition, not just about exploration, but also to secure a dominant presence in space. The USSR struck first in 1957, launching Sputnik 1, the first space probe to successfully orbit the Earth. This shocked the United States, which had considered itself technologically superior. The probe had radio capabilities and emitted beeps as it circled the Earth every 96 minutes. Primitive by today's standards, this was the beginning of the current space age. After two failed attempts, the U.S. launched the Explorer 1 probe in 1958. In that same year, the U.S. founded NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. While Sputnik may have been the first, there are now almost 8,000 satellites orbiting above, with an exponential increase in new satellites going up each year. After the success of Sputnik, the USSR shocked the world once again in 1961 when they launched the first human into space. Yuri Gagarin, the first cosmonaut, or Russian astronaut, made one orbit of the planet before returning to Earth. The U.S. countered by launching Alan Shepard into space, but this mission was only a partial Earth orbit. Later that year, the USSR had a second cosmonaut orbit around Earth for a full day, achieved the first spacewalk, and sent the first woman, Valentina Tereshkova, into space. By now, it was clear the U.S. was falling behind in the space race, which prompted U.S. President John F. Kennedy to make a now-famous speech in 1962, pledging to land a man on the moon before the end of the decade. This seemed extremely optimistic for a country that was already behind in the game. Well, in 1969, the Apollo 11 mission took 3 astronauts, Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, and Neil Armstrong, into orbit around the moon and landed a craft on the lunar surface. Neil Armstrong became the first human to set foot on the moon. This was the first of a series of lunar missions involving multiple crew members, lasting until 1972. Today, a new space race exists, and it doesn't involve nations, but billionaire business titans like Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk. More on that ahead. Probes, rovers, and telescopes. While the United States was in the process of planning the moon missions, NASA had already been launching space probes. Mariner 2 was the first probe to study another planet as it flew past Venus. This was followed up with Mariner 4, which was the first probe to photograph a planet as it flew by in 1965. That planet was Mars, and for the first time, human beings had proof there were no green men or Martians on the planet, just a cold, cratered, moon-like surface. The most famous probes of all, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, were launched in 1977 and were the first probes to leave our solar system, while gathering and relaying important data about space conditions and taking pictures of both Jupiter and Saturn along the way. Today, they are still transmitting data, but are expected to cease transmissions sometime after 2025. This milestone in space travel was showcased in the Star Trek motion picture film released in 1979, when a Voyager probe makes a return to Earth after being modified by an alien intelligence with a mission to destroy the planet. Currently, neither probe has returned to Earth, and let's hope it stays that way. As technology has advanced, so have the capabilities of the instrumentation of space exploration. Since the late 90s, NASA has landed 5 robotic rovers on Mars, with the most recent, Perseverance, launching in 2021. NASA is using the data collected to plan its first human-led Mars mission. While probes and rovers are great to look at objects in our own solar system, when it comes to looking into deep space, the telescope is the way to go. Various space telescopes have been launched since the mid-60s, but the most famous to date would have to be the Hubble Space Telescope. Sent up in 1990, the Hubble has sent back some of the most astounding pictures of deep space. This has helped scientists learn more about how planets and galaxies form. But when it comes to giant space telescopes, there's a new kid on the block. The James Webb Telescope closed out 2021 with a successful launch into space. While it has yet to start performing its duties, this telescope is 100 times more powerful than Hubble and is expected to provide critical data about the origins of the universe. Space stations. With satellites, probes, and people being sent into orbit, space stations became the next logical step. The Soviet Union launched the first space station, Salyut 1, into orbit in 1971, and the U.S. launched Skylab 1, the first orbiting laboratory, in 1973. Skylab was important because astronauts and scientists were able to study the Earth and the effects of long-term spaceflight on the human body. The Soviet Union continued launching space stations, and in 1986, the first core module of the Soviet space station Mir was put into orbit. A month later, cosmonauts boarded and occupied the station. The main benefit of Mir was its modular design, which allowed other modules to be added to the main core, several of which would be added to its infrastructure over its 15-year lifespan. The ISS, or International Space Station, replaced Mir as a cooperative venture between the United States, Russia, and several other nations. The first core module segment launched in 1998, and the first of a rotating Russian and American crew arrived in the year 2000. Similar to the design of Mir, the station had modules which were added over the years. The ISS took 10 years to complete and is the length of a football field, orbiting 250 miles above the Earth. Now celebrating over 20 years in orbit, it is the longest operational permanent space station. Since its inception, almost 250 people have spent time on the ISS doing science experiments, research, and learning how to live in space. The Space Shuttle. The space race had long been dominated by rockets bringing astronauts and payloads into space, but NASA decided there had to be a better way and spent the 1970s designing and testing a reusable space shuttle. However, Hollywood beat NASA to the punch in 1979 when it released Moonraker, a James Bond film in which a space shuttle is stolen and 007 is tasked with finding it, ultimately lifting off destined for a hidden space station. Science fiction at the time, but 2 years later, a reality. NASA caught up to Hollywood when it launched Columbia, the world's first space shuttle, in 1981. It was in these early days of the shuttle program that astronaut Sally Ride became the first American woman in space in 1983. Despite several successful missions, the program would meet with tragedy when Space Shuttle Challenger exploded shortly after liftoff in 1986. The shuttle program was halted for almost 3 years for a safety review after the incident. After flights resumed, and with years of successful missions into orbit, docking shuttles with Mir and the ISS, the program met with another tragedy. In 2003, the shuttle Columbia broke apart while re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Not many could have predicted the outcome, but this event would be the beginning of the end for the Space Shuttle program. The program again resumed, but due to increasing budget cuts to NASA funding and safety concerns, in 2011, the Space Shuttle program was shut down. This opened the door to the privatization of space exploration. Battle of the Billionaires. After the end of the shuttle program, NASA began outsourcing its rocket program. Billionaire Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, won its first NASA contract worth $278 million in 2006 to help develop its Falcon 9 rocket and Dragon space capsule, with the focus being on the reusability of both the rockets and craft. In 2008, SpaceX became the first privately funded company to launch a liquid-fueled rocket into orbit. They surpassed this feat the following year, becoming the first private company to send a satellite into orbit. The company's success continued by docking a capsule with the International Space Station in 2012. In 2018, the Falcon Heavy lifted off to become the world's most powerful operational rocket, with a payload capacity more than double that of the Space Shuttle. The test load on the trip was Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster, which is still out in space to this day. Now, when it comes to billionaires and the privatization of space exploration, another two names are at the top of that list: Amazon's Jeff Bezos and Virgin's Richard Branson. With their focus more on space tourism, 2021 was a big year for Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic. Founded in the year 2000 by Amazon billionaire Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin would develop a vertical takeoff, vertical landing rocket ship to send paying passengers into suborbital space. The big day finally arrived when Blue Origin finally launched Bezos and its first space tourists for a quick jaunt into space aboard the New Shepard rocket in July of 2021. Not wanting to be left out and actually beating Bezos into space by a mere 9 days was Richard Branson and his Virgin Galactic spacecraft. Founded in 2004, Virgin Galactic's goal is to open up space tourism for the average person. Although with a current ticket price of $450,000 a seat, it may take a while before the average person can actually book a seat. However, with the emergence of these and other companies, the future of space travel is no longer reliant solely on government space agencies. When the space program started, astronauts needed to have the right stuff. But today, getting to space is more about having the right stuff in your bank account. Space tourism. In the late 80s, many government-funded space agencies were starting to see decreased budgets. The fall of the Soviet Union also had a big impact on their space program. So, in 1990, the Tokyo Broadcasting System paid Russia between $10 and $35 million to have one of their reporters go on a mission. Toyohiro Akiyama was flown to the space station Mir, where he spent a week reporting from space. In 2001, Dennis Tito, an American engineer and entrepreneur, became the first space tourist to fund his own trip into space, where he spent nearly 8 days in orbit aboard the International Space Station. And in 2006, millionaire Anousheh Ansari became the world's first female space tourist. Other notable tourists to the ISS include Guy Laliberté, the founder of Cirque du Soleil, who paid over $40 million for the experience. And we can't forget that Lance Bass of NSYNC almost went to space. He completed his cosmonaut training in Russia, but his funding fell through before the big trip. Space travel was now seen as a money-making business opportunity and opened the door to the billionaire space race we see today. Now, today's version of space tourism does not include an extended stay on the ISS or a dash around the moon. It's more like go up, get weightless, take a look out the window, and come back down. But it's a start. Space tourist is now an actual word and not just something made up for a sci-fi movie. This is where the two worlds meet, with probably the most famous space tourist to date, Captain Kirk himself, William Shatner. Not only did the star of Star Trek land a seat on a Blue Origin flight at the age of 90, he also became the oldest person ever in space. It seems we're looking out on the horizon of a brand new industry. How long before we're going on a space cruise or booking a stay at the Hilton Space Hotel? Thanks for watching. Your support really matters, so remember to like and subscribe. Oh, and check out another one of our great videos.